Hi there, everybody, and welcome to a virtual tour of the Peabody Museum's Division of Entomology. My name is Aiden Houlihan. I'm a junior in Trumbull College, and I'm an EEB major, and I've been working in the division for about 3 years now, since my first year here at Yale. We're going to start off this tour in the main workroom of the Division of Entomology, and this photograph, it's empty, but usually there would be 3, 4, 5 students, busy as bees, as it were, working on various projects that we have ongoing in the division at any given time, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But first and foremost, we want to talk about what is entomology. So entomology is the study of insects and now more broadly arthropods also. So insects, as many of us know, are six-legged. They have three body parts. They have an exoskeleton. Um, and arthropods are just outside of that. There are things like spiders, centipedes, millipedes, and the like. Things that aren't insects, but aren't arthropods, so we study them as well. And something that's incredibly exciting and interesting about uh, this group of organisms is their diversity, which is one of the main themes that we're going to talk about in this tour. The diversity in the insect world is wide and spectacular. Insects make up 80% of all known species on Earth. That means every mammal every reptile every plant, fungus, what have you, only makes up 20% of everything that we know. All the rest, insects, which is a bit of an issue because how many entomologists do you know? None? Probably none. I didn't know any before I came to Yale. But how many human doctors do you know? Psychologists or surgeons or people that work with the human body? Hundreds of thousands, maybe, not that you know personally, but know of. And we really are just beginning to understand how the human body works. Imagine the depth of knowledge that we are missing when it comes to insects if they make up 80% of all the species on Earth. Right? Craziness. Which means I'm sitting here giving you this tour, acting like I know what's going on and know all about insects, when in reality, we are just scratching the surface with our knowledge of these creatures, which I guess makes it really exciting to be in the field where you can potentially find something new and undiscovered, unknown to science, if you just look. So we're gonna, go into a little bit more about insect and arthropod diversity. Here we can see we have some insects in the bottom right-hand corner. We have a morpho butterfly, the blue there. We have a wasp, and then going around we have a crab, a horseshoe crab. We have a tailless whip scorpion. We have a millipede, a centipede, a scorpion, a tarantula, some other spiders, all sorts, right? There's just a huge array of diversity in the arthropod world in terms of body form, size, uh, function, behavior, weaponry, just a huge array of features and variations that we can explore and study. There's a very famous quote that says, if God exists, he has an inordinate fondness for beetles. And we can see this collection of beetles here, which just shows a huge range of diversity in terms of, again, size, adaptation, weaponry, color, all of which are, enticing to discover and learn about in the insect world. So I said we'd talk a little bit about what exactly we do here in the Division of Entomology. And so one of our most important projects, and what many of the undergraduates are working on day to day, is the digitization of the collections. So all of the specimens in our collection, about 500,000 of them here at ESC, and then in total about 1.5 million if you include the specimens held at West Campus, are in the process of being digitized and made available online to everybody on the Peabody Museum's digital online archive. And so what that means is we're going to take the information associated with each specimen. They'll have a label, each of them. Here we can see this one was collected in New Jersey at the Batstone Pine Barrens on July the 19th, 1975, in a Robinson trap, which is a method of collecting insects, by Dale F. Schweitzer. I know that it's Dale F., or I know that it's Dale because I've typed that name thousands of times when digitizing. And then below we have the number that it's associated with in our collection. So this type of high-res photography is being done for many of the specimens, as well as digitization without this photography. And so all of this amassed metadata can then be used by researchers to answer all sorts of questions without having to collect specimens themselves or wait to get a loan of these specimens, without having to have them physically in front of them. They can do quite a lot of research on variation over time or what have you just with this data, which is one of the reasons that natural history collections are so important, which is the second big theme that we want to talk about in this tour. So natural history collections allow us to have a record of the past in a way that very few other things do. By having these specimens, we can not only look at type specimens over time, which are specimens that represent uh, kind of definitive versions of species, we can also look at how these might have variations over time and how they can change based on the area. You know, maybe these two variations are actually two subspecies and not one singular species that we had previously thought. These sorts of collections allow us to answer those questions. They also allow us to, as I said, conduct research going forward. One of the big questions that we have right now is, how is research going to change in the coming years? And how has it changed to get to where we are now? One good example of this is, you guys know those small white butterflies that are, you know, around most places in the Northeast. You've definitely seen them around campus, either in the early fall or spring. They're very normal, commonplace, boring looking. They're called cabbage white butterflies, and they're common in a lot of the Northeast United States. So common that museums everywhere had just about their fill of cabbage white butterflies maybe 15, 20, 30 years ago. So around that time, you know, people kind of stopped collecting them. Why would you? You could find more exciting, bigger species to collect and not take up so much space in your collection with these boring white butterflies. That makes quite a lot of sense, right? You know, get the things that people want to see or research. Well, 30 years pass, and now we have a lot of questions about climate change. And so this is an issue that's come up. Someone came to us saying, can I see your records of cabbage white butterflies? I'm trying to see how their range has changed over the last 30 years. We don't have that data, sorry. No one else has that data either. So we're not able to do that research, even though that's a really important question. Are these ranges changing based on climate change? We could have known. And that leads us to kind of the issue with modern collecting. What's worth collecting? How do we know? Everything could be important. We don't know how questions are going to change, how research methods are going to change, how experimental methods are going to change. What do we keep? What's important? These are things that Larry, the collections manager for the Division of Entomology, really has to consider. So here we're moving into the collection itself, which is lovingly known as the Morgue because it is cold and everything in it is dead except for us. So here we see, you know, the large cabinets that we have, the Delta cabinets, which are movable if you know, spin handle on the outside. And we have these rows of drawers and trays within them housing the 500 specimens we have housed at ESC. I really encourage you to come at some point when the museum is open again, or when ESC is open again, and take one of these tours for real, because you know we can. I can actually show you around the collection, but for right now, we'll just do it virtually. And so we're going to talk about preservation methods for the things that we have stored in our collection. So the first preservation method is what's known as wet preservation. So this is used for things that are known as soft-bodied, mostly things like spiders, larvae, centipedes, millipedes, scorpions. A good way to explain it is, I like to think of it as, if you saw a spider dead in your garage, in your basement, it's all curled up, its legs are crumpled, it's a little raised, and you can't tell what it is. So we store these specimens in a mixture of ethanol and glycerol so that they can stay plump, is a bit of a food word, but plump. So they stay nice and plump so we can tell what they are, basically. Um, this photo is from a current exhibit at the Peabody, right in the lobby, uh, and we can see a huge array of, of specimens housing a whole hodgepodge of of fluids here, which is another interesting question from kind of the annals of entomology collection history. If you're out looking for a butterfly, which doesn't have to be kept wet, and you find a super rare spider, you might not have the lab grade ethanol and glycerol mixture that you need to properly preserve that spider, but you really want it. So you might use whatever ethanol you happen to have on hand. That might be moonshine or tequila or what have you. You know, is what do you do with that when you get back to the lab? What if you forget about it and we find it 60, 70, 80 years later? Because these will stay for, as far as we know, forever. Do we move it out of the liquid? Do we try to determine what it is and then move it out? Do we just leave it? What's the best course of action? So this is something that we're kind of having to deal with as we find different things or get donated different things that have been preserved in this way. The second method of preservation is known as dry preservation. So this is what's done for most insects, notably Lepidoptera, butterflies, and moths. So we can see here a tray of dry mounted specimens. And the angle is a bit hard to see. They're all mounted on a single pin through the body, which happens after these specimens will have been dried out. They'll be spread open with their wings splayed like that, and that's mostly for the purposes of identification. In case you hadn't guessed it, you know, moths and butterflies are very easy to identify using the patterning on their wings, the coloration and patterning on their wings. And so they're spread open like that, so both the fore and the hind wing can be seen. They're let to dry on what's called a pinning board, pins stuck through them, placed in these trays after they've been identified. And then we can also see some of these barcodes on the collection trays where they've been digitized. We can see they have some numbers and labels under them for to be accessed in the digital collections. So we have trays and trays and trays of these lining our collections. We can see here that it's also used for much larger specimens. These are some large moths that are also dry mounted. See, very easy to identify from their wing color and patterning, as well as maybe their size. Speaking of size, going back to the diversity of insects, one of the best ways that we can kind of visualize that really, and an interesting example of it is this. This is the white witch moth, and it has a wingspan, you can't really tell, there's not much scale here, of an average of a foot. So this moth is about this wide from tip to tip, and about this tall, like that. Would you like it if that was kind of flying at you in the middle of the rainforest? I certainly would, but I want to collect one. So that's neither here nor there. On the other hand, we have this wasp, which we can see this is a human thumbnail, is minuscule, absolutely minuscule. And so just the differences in size are immense. And this is just one example of the variation across insect species. But it also brings up an interesting question of this white witch moth we know almost nothing about. No one has ever collected its larva, its pupa, its eggs. No one knows what it feeds on. No one knows what the larvae feed on. And these aren't especially that rare to catch. They are the largest in terms of tip-to-tip wing size. Some other moths are bigger in wing area. These aren't incredibly rare to catch. They've been caught and preserved pretty often. But their eggs haven't, their larvae haven't, their pupa haven't. Why is that? What are we missing? We don't know anything about this. It's a big hole in our knowledge, even though this is the adult is large. It's easy to find. And this, on the other hand, I don't know about this particular species of wasp, but a lot of times we're pretty familiar with parasitic wasps and how their host parasite cycle works. We could find whatever this wasp parasitizes, lays its eggs in, maybe a caterpillar of some sort, and we could collect those. We have that knowledge, and we can just kind of wait for those caterpillars to maybe die if they have this parasite in them, and then the parasite will emerge, and we can collect them and identify them, and learn more about them. Uh, and so this is kind of the part in the tour where we would let you roam free in the collections and look at what you wanted to look at. But we can't do that right now. Uh, but I want to talk a little bit about the reasoning for that. A lot of people, maybe you, have a certain stigma about insects, a fear. That's pretty normal in the society, at least in the United States, to have a fear of insects. People are taught that, wasps will sting you and bugs will bite you. They're gross. They're not nice to be around. We want to kill the bugs. Be afraid of insects. That hurts me personally. Insects are great. I love bugs. Uh, and we here at the Division of Entomology would love it if people could be a little more familiar with insects. That's the purpose of this tour, to familiarize you with what insects are, how they work, what they look like, how beautiful they can be, and hope to get people a little bit more comfortable having them around their house, their garden, because some of these are really useful. Ladybugs can eat aphids off of your plants. If you have a garden, if you've seen house centipedes, or these big hairy monstrosities, people say, that live in your basement, those are great because they'll eat cockroaches or other pests. Uh, or daddy longlegs are great for removing pests. All sorts of spiders will get mosquitoes or gnats out of your house. It just goes to show that a lot of times what we might think of insects might be a little stigmatized and might be a little wrong. So I strongly encourage you to come to the Division of Entomology when it reopens. Come take the tour, and I can show you around myself. I can let you wander around yourself and explore everything there is in the real brick and mortar ESC Peabody Division of Entomology. Uh, yeah, you can find me there, often in the back room where I spend all my time working on a slightly different collection, organizing things. That's me from this summer. I would be really excited if anybody, chooses to come. It's always a lot of fun. You get to meet Nicole and Larry and people who work in the division, and Ray. We have a great time, and we would love to have you come. Well, thank you so much for taking this virtual tour with me. Grab your bags and coats on the way out, and hopefully I'll see you soon.